This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not reflect the views of the Village Network. If you are struggling with mental health, please see our show notes for a list of resources.
Welcome to Let's Explore That, a podcast provided by the Village Network where we explore topics of mental health. I'm Clint.
I'm Matthew. Today we're sitting here with two of my favorite Village Network sponsors, supporters, donors, Jeff and Suzanne Souers. So I guess my question is, we're going to take everyone on a journey that I have been so part of for so long, since the day I started. I think you were one of my first donor meetings when I first started. And we sat at a steakhouse and were there for several hours, and I got to know your story. And today we're going to share it with everyone. So Clint has not been on this journey.
I have not heard the story, but I have heard about the Souers and the fun that the Village Network has with them. And so I'm very excited to learn about that and who it honors.
We'll be more than happy to share it with you.
Oh, well, I guess let's start at the beginning. I mean, Suzanne, tell us about Zach as a baby. Tell us about little Zach.
Well, he was our first child, and he was kind of a difficult child at first. He did not sleep through the night. He'd wake up 11 times at night. I mean, at 18 months old, I got mono because of getting up all the time, and I was teaching part-time, so that didn't work too well. And then at age 3, he was old enough to go to the College of Worcester nursery school, and so he went 2 days a week, and noticed that he was not like the other kids. He didn't really jump in and play with everyone. They had a climbing device, and he would be at the very top of the climbing device and just kind of watch everyone play. And I just thought that was different. I remember buying a book called The Difficult Child, and everything in that book was Zach. And I thought, well, he's not alone. Someone else is obviously having some issues too. But then he went to kindergarten. We had moved, so we had to go to a new kindergarten in Cleveland area, and he had a wonderful teacher. Kindergarten, first, second grade, he was really good. He had good friends. The neighborhood was full of boys to play with, so he was more of a normal kid then. Then, once he moved into 4th grade, we had moved again. He had been separated from his friends, and we noticed he started to change then. Why? I don't know. He was just not comfortable not being with his best friend, who was his neighborhood boy, Jake.
When you say that you started to see things change, was it behaviors? Was it just engagement with you as a family? Just because I'm curious of, I have 2 small children, and I see changes in them, but I'm just curious of what kind of things you kind of experienced.
Like from my perspective, I think it's fair to say though that all that she said was absolutely true, but at the same time, he had so many good things going for him too, and when he was with us, many of those things were the focal point. For example, he was fun-loving. He was creative. He was super inquisitive about things. Athletic in every way. Yeah. He just loved to be the center of attention, so to speak. He was, and his lovingness, his caring, and everything, it all would come out, and he just glowed, and I think a lot of the problems, like when he would, like she was mentioning things like nursery school and stuff like that. He did have a lot of problems with things like social anxiety. didn't feel comfortable in groups times, even on teams, even though most every team he played on, he was one of the stars of the team. He just sometimes had trouble with group situations. So, but he and I, we had so much fun. And we did so many things together. And
he was your buddy.
Yeah,
he really was.
I always felt like we were more like brothers than we were father and son, especially at an early age. And being that I was a coach for all the years, summertime was especially a big thing. And we both felt like we needed to devote our time and energies to our kids during that stretch of time each year. And so I always look forward to summer because I knew that both he and his sister Gretchen were going to be spending a lot more time with Dad. And that just made my day. And speaking of making your day, when he was just a small child, he often would stand by we had a front door that had a series of windows down the side. And of course, his mom would let him know that, well, Dad will be coming home pretty soon. And I'd pull in the driveway and I'd see this little hand grab the little curtains and pull them back. And he'd see me and he'd run downstairs because as I pull into the garage and I'd walk in the door and there he'd be with his hands up in the air, wanting me to pick him up. And of course I did. And we'd roll around on the floor and we'd laugh and we'd giggle and we'd read stories. And so there were many things about Zach that were absolutely normal. And he loved to have fun. And he just was so, I think I said it one other time, my senses, all of my senses just soaked him in. He just became that important to me in my life. And so, yes, she's absolutely right about those struggles. And those things were noticed early, but boy, he had so many good qualities too. And I wouldn't give up. Those years, especially, were the best years of my life.
Wow. It's a heavy topic. It is just...
It's okay.
Well, no, and I love that you guys... I feel like when you guys talk about Zach, like I feel like, I know this sounds weird, but all the photo albums you shared, I feel like I know him. And that's... You guys have shared so much about him and his... like so many of the kids that we service at the Village Network, he had struggles too. I mean, and I think that's the hard part too. Nobody wants to need our services. Nobody's like beating our doors down like we want to need what you provide. And so I do appreciate you sharing this because I do think the really cool thing is that you have turned Zach's story into something really positive. So I mean, so he's now in this young elementary school and you're noticing, you read that book and he's, moving, as so many families do. Like you move for work, you were a teacher, you were a coach, like you guys were moving, so, I mean, at what point it sounds like he was doing well for a minute and then maybe it circled back. Like what was that time period like?
Oh, that's when we noticed the attention deficit disorder. He didn't want to do homework. If he liked a teacher, he did well in that class. Remember his 5th grade teacher?
Yeah.
He made the honor roll because he cared and he really worked on it. But then junior high was no fun for him.
Is it fun for anybody?
Yeah, junior high was not fun for anybody.
But I think it's fair to say though, if I may, interject a little bit here, it kind of depended on the teacher to a certain extent. When he was in junior high, they had like a team set up. There were 3 or 4 teachers that worked with him. And I felt like that really hurt kids like Zach because no one really got to know him well enough because he was being shuffled around. And I remember going to a parent-teacher conference, and one of the teachers the whole time...
I know what you're going to say.
The whole time spoke negatively about Zach. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned, I said, well, it's my feeling with the level that he should be at, he should be getting better than a C in this one class. And he said, well, did you ever think that he's just a C student? And just kind of blew me off. So teachers are so important to kids. And I think the point that, Suzanne made about certain teachers, he liked his teacher. It wasn't so much that he liked them. I think that particular teacher had an interest in him, was interested enough in him to get to know him and get to understand that maybe he was a little different than most of the other kids, but there was a lot of good inside of him, and she just learned how to work with him and brought all the good stuff out. And so, I think that's a real factor too.
Well, and I think Emily Mariola said a similar thing. Like back then, no one knew what ADHD was. Like,
right.
And so Zach had ADHD. Like that takes a special skill set to teach Zach or someone with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would even take it into sports. Zach was a special athlete. He truly was. He was skilled at everything from the time he's just a little guy. And he played, his best sport was baseball, although he excelled at all of them. And I can honestly say that the best coach he ever had, now this is counting from minor league baseball when he was 8 years old all the way up through high school, the best coach he ever had was when he was in the 10 to 12 year old range. And this guy totally got Zach. He understood him. Sometimes Zach had body language that if you didn't know him, you could misinterpret it. And this coach got Zach. He understood him.
And he got a lot out of him.
And he got more out of him than any coach ever has. And so, it didn't just apply to his teachers. It also applied to his coaching. And since sports was so important to him, and he knew to me also being a coach, that was real significant for him. Because later on, he had a couple coaches that didn't understand him. And there were some problems with that.
Yeah.
So,
well, when he was diagnosed by his pediatrician that he had ADHD, they put him on Ritalin or Adderall, one of those. And boy, were we happy. Gretchen and Jeff and I were happy, but not Zach. He said, I don't like it. It's controlling me. And he quit taking it. He just didn't like that. And if had he liked it, we might be talking a different story. But he just didn't like not having control.
Yeah, and it was probably early enough in that sort of thing that it was like, well, what are we going to, like, they're not going to change dosage or anything like they would today, where they're, you're going to spend weeks and months and trying to figure out what blend of whatever.
Yeah.
It's more of like, well, this is the prescription, and so you're either going to take it or you're not going to take it.
Well, he never did, right from the get-go, no matter what his age was, he never did care for the fact that some substance was going to make him feel better. He felt like that was his job to make
even
him
as
feel better.
as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And how old are we talking about at this
He's
point?
about 10.
10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, about 1990.
Wow.
Yeah, he did not like that.
Boy, we don't give kids enough credit.
Yeah, that he knew. And I appreciate that, Zach, because you tell a story when Zach was a little bit older about the garbage disposal, and I think of that moment.
That one.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'd like me to tell that, I will.
I think you should. I think because that kind of this came up several times in his journey.
I don't remember if he was in high school or if he was already out of high school.
Oh, we were here in Worcester.
Well, yeah.
It was high school.
Okay.
Definitely.
One day, and here again, this is during a time when we both noticed that, boy, he's doing really well. He's really being helped on the medication that he was on. And so it made it hopeful for us that, hey, we finally hit on something. It's going to help him get back to more of a normalcy thing. And one day I'm sitting at the table having a bite to eat, and he walks into the kitchen and he goes over to the sink. He had his pills sitting there beside the sink, and he says, "Hey, Dad, watch this." He takes the whole bottle of pills, pours them in the sink, turns on the garbage disposal, and grinds them all up. And he just laughed. He said, "I don't need these things." And he walked away. And so it was such a,
So hard.
for the lack of a better word, it was such a downer because we were feeling so good about where he was at that moment, what that medicine was doing for him. But it all came down to what Suzanne already said, control. He didn't like the fact that pill was making him feel better. I want to feel better on my own.
And as a society, so I'm going to go back. So 1990. I was a freshman in high school. We did not talk about mental health. If we had it, we didn't even know it was a thing. Like we didn't.
Stigmas.
Oh. So how were you handling? Like, so you noticed he was doing well, and now Zach's saying this isn't working for me, and he's making that choice. Mm-hmm. What's your support system like? Are you talking to anyone about this other than each other? We would make mention from time to time, like with our parents, Zach's grandparents. And of course, Gretchen knew, she's right in the house. Mm-hmm. But we rarely talked to our friends about it. It was like,
you don't talk about it.
There was such a...
You didn't want anybody to think something was wrong.
Yeah, it was
embarrassing.
Well, right. Are you going to feel it might be there? Is it going to get flipped on us? Is it our fault as parents? What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing?
Well, not... I suppose that's part of it, but it was more so knowing what society felt about mental illness and emotional problems at that time. I know from my standpoint, I didn't want people to feel that way about Zach. Like, oh, that kid, what's wrong with him? He's got problems, and what we would often hear was, don't worry about it. He's going through a stage. Yeah. I'm sure you've heard this. He'll outgrow it.
It's a phase, yeah.
And that's what we got a lot from our parents.
And we knew better.
And I tried to tell my parents, I can't speak for Suzanne, but I know I tried to tell my parents, this is something more. You don't understand. And they would kind of laugh it off. Oh, he'll be okay. And I'd say, Mom, or I'd say, Dad, I don't think you quite understand what we're dealing with here. And they didn't, because they grew up, in the 30s and 40s, and, that just wasn't on the table for discussions.
Right.
And so the fact that we were kind of reaching out a little bit and sharing, they kind of didn't want to hear it. Because they just thought that he's going to be okay. He'll be fine.
That's
And
heavy.
one caveat is that my sister has real mental issues. She's bipolar, schizophrenic, and Zach saw that, and I think he was afraid.
It scared him.
Yeah, he says, "I don't want
I
to.
don't want to be like that.
Don't want to be like that."
And do you think the medication side of things was a little bit of that, where it's like, well, my aunt has to take meds, and I don't want to be like her.
That's a very good point.
That is a good point.
Something that, to be honest with you, I hadn't really thought about.
Huh.
You know,
We tried counseling too. I mean,
Well, that was one thing I was going to ask. Is
Well,
because counseling's
early on.
huge now.
I can remember the first thing that I did, I had him talk to one of the school guidance counselors. That was first step. And then from there, we got referred to a child psychologist.
right.
And so Zach was probably about 13, 7th grade. And the school or the child psychologist told us he needs to be on medication. And then, of course, when he was having problems taking the medication, the child psychologist told us he needs to be on this medication because if he doesn't take this medication, he will start to self-medicate somewhere along the line. And later on, as he got older, he did, in fact, start to self-medicate in ways that you don't want to. And so, that was a problem. You know, I don't know if this is the time to say this, but I'm going to anyhow. I think it needs to be pointed out what all this guy was dealing with. He was ADD. He was obsessive compulsive. Mm-hmm. He was a germaphobe. He had social anxiety. He had anger issues. He had depression. And later on, he became paranoid.
Yeah.
My count, that adds up to 7. Any one of those things by themselves can be debilitating, can affect you. He was carrying all of this. Mm. As I look back, it was really amazing that he was able to function as well as he did. You know,
That he even graduated from high school because, I mean, he just gave up. You know, I think that the ADD, he said when he was taking a test, he would hear everyone's pencils.
Yeah. He couldn't take his
He
test.
was so distracted. He couldn't do anything. He just couldn't. So obviously his grades went down the tube.
And
Yeah.
so as like a high schooler, you know, like you said, he kind of gave up. Were parent-teacher conferences like, well, Zach's a bad kid, or because he excelled at sports, was it kind of that thing in most schools where it's like, well, he's an athlete and he's really good, so we can be okay with the academics thing? Or was it like, did you get feedback from his teachers of like, was he disruptive or?
No.
And that's what's so interesting. Like he did it.
No.
I mean, for lack of a better term, he did a great job of really flying under the radar.
Kid. I mean, in the classroom, he didn't disrupt or.
And to your point, he's carrying a lot of stuff and obviously holding it very, very, very well.
Trying to hide it.
Yeah, it was amazing how well he hid it.
Yeah.
You know, many times though, it's true of a lot of people. They're carrying a lot inside, but yet outwardly, they're not showing it. And I think that's what makes all of this very difficult. A lot of times with diagnosis or teachers or counselors identifying someone, because none of us really know what's going on inside of someone else.
Even inside ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all deal with that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and if it's serious stuff, it becomes dangerous. But I think with Zach, a lot of what kind of kept him in line or gave him order and structure was sports. Maybe not for somebody else, but for him, because he loved sports.
Sure.
And so he knew there was, certain times, certain things, whatever, that he had to do. And this gave his life that structure and purpose and allowed him to deal with some of those things.
It's just making it that next milestone of the day. All right, well, then now I get to go to practice. Now I get to go to the weight room. Now I get to, and just.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when he got out of high school, that all was gone. He did have opportunities to go and play college football. He didn't want to do it. And I told him, I think he thought like I expected him to, because I was a football coach.
And you played college football.
Yeah, but I told him, I said, you never want to do something for me. If this isn't for you, that's fine. But I think it'd be a good idea if you still went to school,
He tried that a year at Akron at the branch at Orville.
Yeah, Wayne General.
Yeah, it was called Wayne General back then.
Yeah.
I would think that was a hospital.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird name.
Yeah.
But he just didn't.
And he was told.
But he was really good at writing.
I was going to say, you remember when
Yeah.
he took a creative writing class,
Yeah.
and the teacher or prof, complimented him and said that he was talented and he had a future in writing. And we were kind of thinking, oh, gee, well, maybe that'll be
Spark
something
his
he'll
interest.
take off on. No,
No.
just
But I think with all the items you mentioned, it had to have been challenging. I mean, like you said, one of those things can cloud your mind and just take over, let alone letting those different things change hands and just, well, what's it going to be this time? That's going to,
something is going to be the trigger.
right.
Now he didn't have all of those things all through his life. It was kind of like, it was, cumulative.
Right.
He had these problems, then he had those problems, and these added on. Then he had these problems and something else added on, and it overwhelmed him.
Yeah.
And then he saw his friends going to school and getting good jobs and having families and getting married, and he was like all alone.
Yeah.
Not only all
had no
alone,
friends
but
then.
self-image.
Sure.
He felt defeated. And I suppose this is as good a time as any to start using the word hope.
No.
That's where the hope started to disappear. There's no hope for me. I'm not like them. I'm never going to be like them. I have nothing gone for me. And that just takes on a snowball effect.
Well, and I think, I'm not trying to harp on the things that you mentioned, but even when you overcome one of those things, it doesn't mean that the baggage of them goes away. If you've learned to figure out how to live with a mental health issue or OCD or any of those things, that doesn't mean that it's gone now. It just means that you've built the pathways to keep it under control, but it's still there. And it's always going to be there. And so it adds more to that. What do I have to, I have to keep this in check, and I know how to keep it in check, but if enough other stuff goes awry, well, that thing's going to come unchecked. And now we've got that in the mix.
So he literally was carrying lots of baggage.
Right. He's playing whack-a-mole.
Right. He was drowning.
And there's nothing worse, I think, than that. I suffer from anxiety, and friends now will sit at dinner and talk about, well, what anxiety medication are you on? Now, flashback to 1990, we did not have these conversations, right? And so, like,
Right.
if you could go back, like, looking with the knowledge you have today, if you could go back, if you met Jeff and Suzanne, or you were your dad, what would you say to someone, like, if you know, unfortunately, life is lived forward but understood backwards. Like, what would you go back and say to yourself, or a friend that consoled you and said, hey, I'm having this problem with Zach? Would you?
That now's the time to take action. That now's the time to talk about it. Now's the time to get other people involved. People, maybe even friends. Maybe some of his coaches. I think one mistake, I was just thinking about this, you know, before we came over here. I quite possibly didn't do a good enough job communicating with some of his coaches, letting them know what Zach was like, and that he did have some struggles, and perhaps I could have been more helpful in their understanding of him. Mm-hmm. But we go back to that thing. 30 years ago, you felt like you were better off protecting your child from the outside world by not letting others know what he was going through, if that makes any sense.
Only the necessary parties need to know.
Yeah. Right. Because of all of the taboos, all of the stigmas that were going on. Now we have, I know one of the biggest guys that I remember that kind of started this ball rolling was when Kevin Love, who was with the Cavaliers, he had struggles, and he came out publicly and openly talked about everything he was going through. I sat there listening to him, and I got tears in my eyes, and I thought, how courageous. You know, he is really putting himself out there.
And I wish Zach could have been alive to hear that.
Especially coming from an athlete. As athletic and involved as Zach always was, hearing from a peer, kind of, you know, even though Kevin Love was a pro player, but you know,
somebody who's like me.
Yeah, because he followed sports, religiously, and to hear it from another athlete say, "Oh, well, gee, maybe I'm not so awful after all,"
or alone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But all of that came, and it chipped away at him. And then here's my word again. He lost his hope. You know, when you're so frustrated like that, when you feel you don't really, no one understands you, or no one's there to help you.
Or he doesn't matter.
Or you don't matter anymore. And you feel defeated. I really think that hope is one of the great things that we have in our life. I mean, you know, when you get up in the morning, maybe you're going to go to like a job interview, hoping to get a particular job, or you want to meet that special person in your life that you want to share your life with. You're hoping for a raise at work, or a promotion at work, or whatever the case may be. We have different ways that we allow hope to kind of spur us on. And when you get into a spot where you feel like all your hope is gone, it's like you don't have anything to really live for.
Well, and I think too, what's interesting is I feel like when I've gotten to places that I just feel knocked down, it's not the big tragedy that ruins it all. It's the small things, because you're already so beat down.
It chips away.
It's the small things then that are like, I got 4 red lights instead of I couldn't even get a green. And it's completely up to chance, right? But like, it's the small things then that
It just snowballs. Like,
right. It's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? It's just the one little thing, but it's because of all the other stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
and I think in a world where you talked about Kevin Lover, you just shared that experience. It took me back to something that you shared about Zach once, and I think you both shared this with me at lunch, and I think it's in one of the promotional videos you did for the fund, but he said to you, Dad, you have no idea how much I hurt inside. And you know, when you think about any one of those 7 or 6 diagnoses that you counted, I struggle with anxiety. It came from being on a plane that made an emergency landing. And that was in my 20s, and I'm in but I've also struggled with, my parents' divorce as a child. So you think about all those things, and I did not have the diagnosis that Zach had, but I know how traumatic those were for me. Yeah. When you think about Zach carrying all of that, like, that's a lot to carry. When you shared that story with me, as a parent, like, you guys have really turned his hurt into hope. And I think that's the part that...
Well, we want something good to come out of
I think
his death.
That's probably one of the things that I love the most, is that you can go through tragedy and choose to wallow and live in the tragedy forever, or you can come out of it and make good and change lives forever out of that. And it's incredibly inspiring that the both of you would make the choice to do the latter, because it is... I've mentioned it to Matthew many times, but just like the ripple effect of what the village does is going to be unknown, but it's going to be huge. And so that you guys are taking Zach's story and he gets to have a ripple effect.
Well, I think one thing that I always come back to is the story about Zach when he was standing at the front door. To be honest with you, we had just had an argument, and there were unfortunately a lot of those, because he became very difficult to deal with, and
in his 20s mostly.
Yeah, this is after he got out of high school, and as a father, as the man of the house, you feel like you have to protect your family. I had a daughter and a wife. There were 4 of us that lived under that same roof. And Zach would get very angry and actually violent. And we had just had an argument. And then we said our piece, and he decided he was going to leave. And he started to go to the front door. I can see him like it just happened yesterday. I'll never forget this image. He's reaching for the door, and he stops, and he turns around, and tears are running down his cheeks. And he says, Dad, you have no idea how much I hurt inside. And he just opened the door, and he left. And it broke my heart, because he was right. As much as we tried to understand, as much as we tried to get help, we probably didn't do enough. We didn't give him enough of what he needed. Some of that was our fault. Some of it wasn't, because of the times. But the fact remained, he said that. And so when the name of the fund was being discussed, when we came to the Village Network and we spoke with everyone, and we decided that we were going to team up with the Village Network to start this fund, it was originally going to be called the Zach Souers Giving Fund. And I thought that was fine. And we discussed this in a phone conversation. And so we finished the conversation, and I hung up the phone. I just kind of sat there quietly, and I thought, and I said, I don't know, it doesn't have a ring to it. Something's missing. So I thought about Zach. I just focused on seeing him and focused on that day at the front door when he said that to me. So defeated. And all of a sudden, it was like it was sent from above. The word we were missing was hope. So I called back over here and I said, I'd like to make an addition to the name of the fund. And they said, what's that? And I said, I'd like it to be called the Zach Souers Giving Hope Fund, because that is what he lost. He lost his hope.
Well, and that fund has helped so many kids and the fund was developed, I should share that, for anyone who cannot afford mental health services or doesn't have insurance. And that just helped somebody this past holiday season. And I said it to you the week before Christmas, and you guys said that was a great Christmas gift. And
It was.
Yeah, absolutely was.
That to me is so powerful, because you guys have turned his hurt into hope for so many people. And that is something, to Clint's point earlier, that we just, you can't quantify the ripple effect.
You can't, because you help that person, but who's that person going to help? Yeah. I think that's the coolest thing about things like this, is like it helps one person, but it can change the trajectory of people's lives forever.
Well, for the longest time, we knew we wanted to do something, but we didn't quite know what that was. And we also wanted it to be impactful. And we figured that it was going to be some type of a financial thing. And at the time of his death, we really weren't in a position to make a big commitment, with our finances. But later on, that changed, and I spoke with Suzanne, and we decided, let's get something going. And so we met with our retired minister from the Methodist Church, just to seek out if he had any thoughts. And during the course of the conversation, he said, have you ever thought about the Village Network? And I said, foolishly enough, no, I haven't. And so we came over, to TVN and had a meeting with a good part of the staff, probably about 20 people in the room.
It was like the Last Supper.
It was like the Last Supper.
Were you all on the same side of the table?
And we knew probably after about 10 minutes that we were at the right place. We could see the caring. We could see the commitment. They asked the right questions. We just matched up. We felt comfortable. And so all that remained from there was, getting the fund set up, getting a name for the fund, which I already discussed. And we are just thrilled to be part of the Village Network family, and we'll continue to be involved.
And we were so pleased that the first Sweet Jubilation was dedicated to the fund.
Yes.
And the Skating for Hope that's coming up is going to just keep it going.
Well, tell us about that. So tell us about how that came about. That was a great segue.
Oh.
Suzanne's on roller skates.
Well, it came from you.
Was this my idea?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
To share the...
What's ironic is I don't believe Zach has ever been on roller skates.
Well, and it was funny because
I know Gretchen has, and I have.
Well, and that was the funny part, because I pitched a couple things when we met, and I didn't think that one was going to stick, and that was the one you guys liked.
I
and
know, which is ironic, Zach. We are going to be skating.
Well, and I think it is such a fun event because Clint is also involved.
We are.
Him and his family, and I think this is the first of the Village Networks really family-focused fundraiser where you can bring your whole family. If we're going to have skating, it is on April 17th.
Oh, and pizza and all kind of
7-Up.
and games.
7-Up.
If there isn't enough about the village and marketing the village, but I think it's great that we're doing a family event, especially as the village is starting to get into doing more early childhood and family-oriented services. I think that it's just a really great tie for the whole thing to like start a new era of the Village Network and kind of what they're trying to do.
It's a great way to reach out and to open up and let people come in and see what is going on. You know, I think it's a great way to advertise the Village Network. It's a great way to push our cause. It's just such a good marriage of everything. I'm sure there are hundreds of parents out there, maybe thousands of parents that would like some help. Not quite sure what to do. Notice some things with their kids and so on. And some of the things that you're going to, I don't want to steal your thunder here, Matthew.
You never will.
You know, some of the things that are going to be, you know, connected in conjunction with the Skating for Hope are just wonderful.
Well, and we're providing mental health services now to 5 and below. So to Clint's point, the early childhood mental health is something that we just started doing because 17,000 kids last year, 17,000 kids were kicked out of kindergarten. So, I mean, when you think about Zach at daycare, at age 0, you know, from birth to whenever you had him at the daycare center. Zach behaved. He climbed the tower, which I think there's something with Buddy in the tower. We'll have to figure out if he wanted to climb up and keep an eye on everyone from up above like a cat. But, Zach's services that we're helping are going to now provide, there's such a waiting list for mental health. We're creating a Zach Pack as part of the Zach Souers Giving Hope Fund that's going to be for people on a waiting list to help navigate the conversations. There's so many cool things with that.
And I wish we would have had a Zach Pack back when he was young.
Absolutely.
We knew how to open a conversation and make him feel accepted.
Well, I think parents, a lot of times, they don't know how to go about approaching their child.
And they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. I know I was. I mean, those years, excuse me.
Oh.
It's okay.
We were walking on eggshells in our house.
Right.
Afraid to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, a lot of times conversations were avoided because you were afraid to say the wrong thing that would set him off. And that became worse and worse and worse. And the older he got. And so what we would do, we would just kind of, like I said, avoid him. And I mean, when I think back, it's like, how bad was that? You know, you're avoiding your child so you don't have a confrontation. When deep down inside you want to be with and you want to talk to your child, we were avoiding our child because the smallest thing, you had to really choose your words. And you had to be very careful of saying the wrong thing to set him off. And yes, this Zach Pack idea is wonderful. Matthew, we thank you for that. I don't think you're taking enough credit because when people get to see this for themselves, I think it'll be a real eye opener, and it'll be type of a thing. And I think anytime you're dealing with kids who are at risk here, the earlier you can get things rolling, just like you mentioned, the better off, obviously, that you're going to be. And if some of these parents that are seeing some signs now, don't go the route of, oh, it's a stage, they'll outgrow it. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And that's where the Zach Pack comes in, and it's just a wonderful idea.
It's a great tool.
Yes.
I think too, you guys need to make sure you give yourselves some credit. You said Zach was your oldest.
Yes.
There's no manual. I have 2 girls.
Oh,
There's no manual.
yeah.
You were doing the best you could.
Well, I would be the first to admit that I did make a lot of mistakes. You know.
We all do,
We
though.
all do.
Yeah, wait. And I know that you carry a lot of that, and I just think
Yes, I do.
I think that Zach, although I don't know him, I never met him, I think he would be proud of the work you're doing, and you guys are doing a lot with that, and I feel like I'm so excited to be part of the journey, and I think that the thing that I love most about it is that this, you guys coming here, I wasn't a part of. That happened before I got here, and I feel like
Right.
of all the things that I got to be part of, I think turning this in the direction that you guys wanted to see it has been such a joy. And Clint, I have to give you props, because I think that one of the things we talked about in a meeting was just, where is the family fundraiser, especially because everyone's talking about mental health. And I think Lynette, who's not here to speak to it, she's the same thing. Like, this is a fundraiser where you can bring your 2 daughters and your wife. It's a fundraiser that actually will have family fun in it. Like our Sweet Jubilation is such a fun, formal, festive evening, but it's not for kids.
adults.
It's for adults. And so this is now a fundraiser that helps our kids see that mental health is a conversation, which I think is also just part of the conversation that unfortunately, due to stigma and time, you guys didn't have. So I think, to Clint's point, give yourselves credit, because you did great. I mean, Gretchen speaks so highly of.
Wish she could be here today. She's auditing over at the Career Center.
Oh.
So she'll see Lynn.
She'll be with Lynn Mumma today.
That's right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a few more minutes. Matthew, do you want to make the pitch for Skating for Hope?
Yeah, so
And
if you want
then
to
we
if
can
you want to
talk a
get
little bit more.
involved with Skating for Hope, I mean, you can always, anytime, make a donation to the Zach Souers Giving Hope Fund. Just text Zach to 76278, ZACH to 76278. But if you'd like to get involved with the Skating for Hope event, that is going to be on April 17th here in Worcester at the Acres of Fun, and it is going to get involved, to get tickets, you can text SKATE, SKATE, the number 4, HOPE, HOPE, to 76278. Again, that's SKATE 4 HOPE to 76278, or you can check out our website at thevillagenetwork.org for more information. But we're really excited to have that event and showcase just a fun evening and to celebrate mental health services.
Yeah, it's going to
Just
be
come
great.
see us fall.
Well, that part could
Yeah.
be fun too.
Do you have an ambulance that's going to be outside? Health Point's right next door.
Health
so
Point, yes.
That's true.
And I hope that no one gets hurt. But we did check with our insurance carrier that we are covered.
Well, you can get hurt walking down the street, so
that's right.
It's very
I wouldn't
true.
worry about it. I mean, be prepared, but don't be worried about it.
That's right.
Well, in the Zach Pack is Buddy. I love the Buddy story.
I love Buddy.
Tell me
my
about
God.
Buddy. Who was Buddy?
Buddy was Zach's buddy, and then he named him because Jeff wanted him to be Touchdown.
He was a cat.
He was a cat.
You wanted him to be Touchdown?
Yeah, that was
Very sports oriented. I like that. Okay, Touchdown.
Good.
Yeah, but Zach just went, hey, come here, buddy. And he would hold him. The first thing he'd do when he walked in the house, pick up Buddy. And he'd hold him like a baby. It was just, he was just a real cool cat, real big.
How many pounds was that, Buddy?
Oh, what?
22 pounds.
Wow.
He was a Maine Coon
my.
cat,
Yeah,
long
he
hair,
was- yeah.
and
And Zach had more nicknames for him.
Yeah,
than you
we
could
don't
shake
need- we
a
don't
stick
need to
down.
get
We
into
don't.
but it's so neat to us that Matthew and his group have come up with the idea of having a buddy toy in the Zach Pack.
Kind of a stress toy.
It is so meaningful.
It's darling.
It serves a lot of purposes for us because he was a special part of our family, as many families do have a pet they're a part of the family. But this little guy he brought a lot of joy, and especially with Zach and his struggles, he would kind of lean on his cat at many, many times as a comfort.
And unfortunately, Buddy died a year before Zach did. So he had a year that he really missed that. His buddy.
I thought Buddy lived after Zach.
No.
I'm so sorry.
Other way around.
Oh, I did not know that.
He was
No, Buddy the cat died on
pancreatic.
Mother's Day of all things.
Oh my.
We had to put him to sleep. He was just awful.
Poor Buddy.
Thank you guys so much for being here and sharing your story and telling us about Zach. The event's going to be so much fun. I'm so grateful that we get to be a part of it with you guys, and it's going to be great.
Yeah,
But
it will, and we just want to have Zach's legacy helping a lot of people from ages 1 on up.
Well, I hope everyone listening laces up their skates for a great cause and sees us on April 17th.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.